Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 245, and I hope you all had an amazing weekend. We have a lot to cover in today's Red Pill, so I just want to jump straight into it. But as always, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer, or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. I myself am drinking some water with magnesium added. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure you used the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. So in the event that it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or in the event that I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill podcast. And by the way, you can see the title of today's video, so we will have a section dedicated to XRP and my top 3 expectations for XRP, since I've got a bunch of requests over the past couple weeks regarding my 3 Bitcoin scenarios and how you guys would like to know my take on what's ahead for XRP. So I will be doing a lot more talking about XRP today, but before we get into that, we need to set the tone for the rest of the podcast, and we will also be recapping the 3 Bitcoin scenarios and where we're at, because what's happening with Bitcoin and what's happening with Bitcoin dominance very much gives us the story on what's ahead for XRP. Many of you are already aware of this though. So anywho, if you are new here to the Wolfpack, welcome. So great to have you here with us. We are going to be covering a lot of important things today, so please make sure to get that pen and paper ready, take notes, and let's do what we do best. And I'm really excited that we're making our way towards a Red Pill 250. I cannot believe that. Absolutely wild. So we're closing in on that big milestone, and I'm really grateful for all of you being a part of this journey. Absolutely super appreciative for every single one of you. Now let's get into today's podcast. I want all of you to keep in mind that since we've completed the 47th week of the year, we'll definitely want to focus on the number 86 and its mirror number 68 moving forward. So we're going to start off today's podcast just recapping some things that have gone down, but some of you already heard me discuss how we had Bitcoin's all-time high on October 6th, which is the esoteric 8-6 date, or 6-8 written internationally. Again, there's a reason why we always consider our mirror numbers in our decodes, especially for these applications. And the reason I say October 6th is the esoteric 8-6 date is because the month of October starts with the prefix octo, which means 8 in Latin. Like an octagon has 8 sides, making October the true 8th month in the system. So we have from October 6th, the 8-6 code, until November 21st, Bitcoin crashed for exactly 47 days into the 47th week of this year. And then it proceeded to close off the 47th week of the year at $86,000. Perfect. So now that we've moved on from the 47th week of the year, and we had this 86 code ritual, which started on the day that leaves 86 days left in the year, by the way, on October 6th, the esoteric 8-6 date. And now when we measure from that date until today, which would be December 7th, is actually 8 weeks and 6 days. So this is where it starts to get really juicy, because I've shared with you all my 3 scenarios for Bitcoin, which, as I promised, I will be recapping in a little. But we talked a lot about moving into this particular week of the year, the 50th week of the year, which many of you will be watching this podcast as we've kicked off the 50th week of the year, except for those out there, those burning the midnight oil, as they say, those late night wolves. But anywho, I think this is where things start to get really interesting as we're pivoting into this 50th week of the year. I'm now showing you that this connection to Bitcoin's all-time high, which was the day leaving 86 days left in the year with the esoteric 8-6 code, and then 8 weeks and 6 days later, we land into wrapping up this week. And we are now pushing into the 50th week of this year, starting on December 8th, Monday. And remember the significance of this number 50 that we were talking about regarding Bitcoin and crypto as a whole. And we're going to start to get a little deeper now, but we were talking about the significance of the number 50, specifically for this year, because we're in the year of the snake. And again, just a reminder, we're moving into the 50th week of the year starting tomorrow. So this is why I'm going into this. So we have snake in Gematria gives you 50. Also, the mythological archetype that allegedly created Bitcoin called Satoshi Nakamoto also turned 50 years old this year on April 5th of 2025. So this code, of course, directly affects crypto until Satoshi's 51st birthday on April 5th of next year, 2026, when we'll officially be in the Chinese year of the fire horse. And we'll talk about that a lot in the future. But for now, getting back to the week ahead, the 50th week of the year, it's crucial that we focus on the fact that it's the 50th week of the year because of this code. And during the 50th week of this year, we'll of course have the upcoming FOMC meeting that everyone's been talking about this Wednesday, December 10th. And since I already decoded that in the past 2 weeks of Red Pill podcasts, I won't take up any of your time with that today. But what I do want to mention, keeping up with our theme of the number 86 and the mirror of it, 68, which, by the way, we're going to talk about that for the entire podcast because it's so important now, considering we watched what just happened with Bitcoin's price. The fact that the following day after the FOMC meeting, which will be, let me just quickly go over to this Thursday, December 11th, it will have a 68 double-digit date numerology. And not only that, but this Thursday is tied to the date of February 16th, which is the last day of the year of the snake. And when we include the end date, you're going to see they are 68 days apart. So we have this 68 code and we also have this 68 code, and we're just keeping it to this particular Chinese year for now. So please consider what we're doing now is we're not mixing and matching and making things stretch to work in our favor. This is high level decoding, but we're trying to keep it simple right now. So we also can't forget the fact that the date that I'm connecting this to, February 16th, the last day of the year of the snake, is also the 47th day of next year, bringing this entire decode full circle, because we were talking about the 47-day crash into the 47th week of the year. Bitcoin closed at 86K. So let's recapitulate. Our October 6th code that we started with, the esoteric 8-6 date, Bitcoin crashed for the 47 days into the 47th week of the year, and then it closed off that week at 86K. And now that we've made it through 8 weeks and 6 days since that all-time high date on October 6th, we now have the mirror 68 code showing up the day after the FOMC. So once the FOMC finishes off, we start working with a new energy, and it's starting on that 68 code energy, this energy that we've been seeing extremes with from the date to the next date, all-time high to crash low. This is like a ripple effect, okay? So look at it that way. as you're learning the meaning behind these numbers and the purpose of these numbers as we decode. So we're seeing this mirror number 68 showing up as we're on the other side of it now. I hope this is making sense. So we have the day after the FOMC giving you the 68 double-digit date numerology with 68 days until the last day of this lunar year, which just so happens to be the 47th day of next year. It's literally a perfect ripple effect of time in both directions using the same code, covering everything from price to the timing of the moves. So then I thought, well, maybe let's try connecting this upcoming week, this 50th week of the year, to another significant week we had this year. And of course, naturally, I thought about the week of April 7th. You guys hear me talk about April 7th all the time, following Trump's World War tariff. And this is where things started getting really interesting. By the way, for those that are new here, it took exactly 47 days from the stock market topping out at an all-time high on February 19th until it bottomed at the day of the tariff crash lows on April 7th, the 4-7 date with the 47 code. This is why we're continuing this theme here of the number 47 is probably one of the most important numbers. And now that we just watched the crypto market crash, one of the craziest Bitcoin crashes we've ever seen, into the 47th week of this year, this is undeniable. This was the lowest MACD reading on the daily we've ever seen in Bitcoin's history. Like, anybody who's a chart analyst should realize that was very extreme. It was very extreme. Also, regarding fear and greed, we had one of the longest runs of extreme fear readings that we've ever seen. Longer than we saw during the FTX crisis. And I did some pretty good work in my last YouTube video showing off some of the things that are going on between MicroStrategy, FTX crash, and all of that stuff tied to where we're at today. There's always somebody to blame, you know? Getting back to this, here we are a year later, and Bitcoin just mimicked, or not a year later, here we are later in the year is what I meant to say, and Bitcoin just mimicked the same exact move the stock market did earlier this year between February, March, April, and we just did it here between October and November, moving into December. So it feels like to me like we've mimicked those events, and perhaps some people that you're tuning into, maybe some other analysts, whether they're specifically focusing on crypto or stocks, I'm not sure. Maybe they're starting to realize that either Bitcoin is leading the stock market or the stock market is leading Bitcoin. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments about that. Because, well, clearly Bitcoin is not following the indices as it usually does. And what we're also seeing is gold and precious metals are in an extreme too. So one of the most insanely overbought daily RSIs and weekly RSIs for gold back in October, right? This is a very extreme environment that we're working with right now. So that's what's making it so fascinating, like why everything feels like it's slightly off and not the usual cycle that we were typically getting in the past. This is very nuanced, and it's making it very difficult to navigate, and that's not an excuse, it's just what we're working with today. It's like having to be a chef that's working with subpar ingredients, but you need to make food, right? So the more skills you have as a chef, the more you can kind of coax out of those subpar ingredients. And that's what I think decoding helps us a lot with, hopefully. It's hopefully what it does for you. It's definitely what it's done for me. Going into this stuff blind, like many have, and not having this sense of awareness and this conscious understanding of markets, it makes you incredibly emotional during these swings. But for me, there's been no emotion during these cycles. And it was same back in 2021 heading into 2022. It just is what it is. So this is how you can have much more of like an investment mindset and get this philosophy of how it is to be a sophisticated investor without allowing all this emotional turmoil destroy you. You know, it was a big theme in my live stream that I had yesterday about how this whole crypto and investing thing was meant to set people free, but unfortunately it's actually made them very depressed, very anxious, and just like consistently in worry. That's not what it was supposed to do, guys. So what finding decoding did for me was it allowed me to move on from those emotional behaviors. I was hopefully that could do the same for you. But anyways, I get it. Price makes us feel emotion, and price is doing a lot of interesting things right now. Kind of what I just wanted to mention was to know your thoughts on, is Bitcoin leading the stock market, or is the stock market leading Bitcoin? Perhaps in next week's Red Pill, I could personally share my thoughts on that, and it would be cool to gather your opinions over the week. So let's look at how the 50th week of the year, starting tomorrow, December 8th, is connected to that week of all of this madness, which was really triggered by April 2nd in 2025, this year, Trump's Liberation Day. Okay? The date that really sped up that crash into April 7th that we were just mentioning. So we're not including the end date here. We're just connecting Trump's Liberation Day on April 2nd, 2025 over to December 8th, tomorrow. Or it might be today, depending on when you're listening. And you're going to see a very important code here. It's the number 25. Again, we have the number 250. We remove the 0 and we have 25. I was immediately intrigued when I saw this because if you watched my Year of the Snake decode that was released at the beginning of this year, you'd remember the significance of this number 25. It was one of the numbers that I isolated as a key number for the entire year because we're in the Gregorian year, shortened to 25, and we also had the code in the Hebrew year earlier this year because it was the Hebrew year of 5,785, which becomes 25 before reduction. So we had that synchronicity. But not only that, crypto in Gematria equals 25, and 97 is the 25th prime number. So we had so much overlap here, right? And then I noticed at the last minute, maybe some of you already noticed it, when we connect Trump's Liberation Day to tomorrow, Monday, December 28th, it's 8 months and 6 days apart. So there you have it, that 86 code again. You cannot make this up. By the way, when you look at the list of stock market crashes in Wikipedia, you're going to find that the 3rd and the 4th of April are ranked as one of the most historic market crashes in the history of the stock market. It's pretty wild. It's up there with all the other major crashes that have occurred. So I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. This is really important shit that we're talking about here. And when I saw this 8-6 connection, I was like, damn, what a wild, what? So now it's all starting to make so much more sense why we had that huge correction for Bitcoin, the leading crypto in this whole conversation, the one that the institutions are involved in, the first ETF, all the involvement that we're getting, and then you add on the Michael Saylor stuff, there's a lot here. And it starting its crash from that esoteric 8-6 date into the $86,000 level, and so far that week was the bottom. Pretty weird, right? Especially when you throw in that 47 code, as Donald Trump is the 47th president. And it was right after he became the 47th president that pretty much all altcoins topped out. It's been a year since. That was when we were in peak euphoria last time, when he was getting into the Oval Office. Remember, he even made his own meme coin. It was tied to the 47th president specifically. And then we crashed all into this time frame, bottoming perfectly on the 478. So this is unbelievable stuff that we're seeing it all interconnected here. And remember before I was telling you about April 7th, well, that's the 97th day of the year. Again, that's the 25th prime number. So we're getting all these 25 connections, and then that also connects us to this upcoming Friday, if you include the end date, again by 250 days. You got the 250 code, you have the 25th prime right there, and then also 8 months and 6 days apart, of course, right? That is so crucial. And also, just for those who are new here, we're in the year of the snake, 97. The snake is the serpent. You see the 97 there, and serpent equals 97 in the same cipher. So this is very important for particularly this year, again. So we have from the lowest part of our market crash for everything on April 7th over to this Friday, just a couple days after the next FOMC meeting, 8 months, 6 days apart, again with that 86 code. Isn't there something that chefs say when like you run out of food? They say like 86 it, like you throw it away, or it's out of stock effectively. It's done, no more. I remember this when I worked as a barista one time. They were using this this phrase. I'm not sure where the origin of it is. Maybe you guys could teach me that. But I was thinking, remember I always used to teach about this 68 code a lot regarding war and conflict, and how there was a theme with regards to all of the major wars starting on a 68 double-digit date numerology or an 86 double-digit date numerology. I mean, all of them. World War I, World War II, Vietnam. I think even the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It's crazy. There's a crazy list of them. I was teaching this leading up into this year, the year of the snake, because it's common for the US to have involvement in war during the year of the snake. So that's just jogging my memory, a little trip down memory lane when I talked a lot about that number 68. And here it is showing up again in the year of the snake. And it's like, damn, I need to go back to the stuff that I was talking about back then. Because to be honest, the new world war is finance. Even Warren Buffett said it himself after Trump's Liberation Day. He was asked in a Berkshire meeting, what are your opinions about Trump's tariffs thing? And he basically said, well, it's kind of an act of world war. And when he said that, I thought, oh yeah, that's the ultimate agenda moving into the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, United Nations 2030, right? You guys have all heard of this. Well, the number one way to accomplish the new world war would be through slowly implementing artificial intelligence and eventually humanoid robots. But in the process of doing that, you create this inflation disaster, further separating the classes, right? It was spot on for Warren Buffett to say that. I perhaps can continue to rant and rave about this, but it's just reminding me of that 68 decode stuff that I was quite heavily sharing back at the end of last year into the beginning of this year. And now that we've made it into the year of the snake and we've seen these big themes with Bitcoin, it's definitely making me rethink a lot. You know, these decodes are crazy. They're tough to remember. I'm decoding fresh stuff every single week. And, you know, there's so many different moving parts here, but it really does feel like there's only been a handful of codes that have been specifically very useful for this year. And I think we have them. It's the number 47 and it's mirror 74. Remember, on this day of April 7th, Bitcoin crashed to 74K. It's the lowest it's been since. And then for 47 days, it hit a new all-time high. Anyways, you guys know about the 47 and its mirror 74. Now we're back here. It's clear that the number 86 and its mirror 68, we must continue to pay attention to it. So that's, again, just a reminder of this number being so important. And that means for any of your decodes moving forward, look out for this number. So for me, this is an absolutely mind-blowing connection from April 7th over to December 12th, this upcoming Friday. 8 months, 6 days apart. So let's just say this week ahead is going to be very interesting. I think we're going to see an epic level of manipulation because just like I showed you how April 7th, this upcoming Friday, is 8 months and 6 days apart. Well, as you're aware, the mirror number of 86 is 68, and this upcoming Friday, December 12th, that we're decoding, is also tied to the date that Bitcoin hit an all-time high on October 6th by 68 days. So if your mind wasn't blown enough, here we go. The day that is the esoteric 8-6 date with 86 days left in the year. If you write it internationally, it would be 6-8, and then 68 days later, you have December 12th. They're exactly 68 days apart from the day that leaves 86 days left in the year. The day following the 68 double-digit date numerology which also happens to be 68 days left in the year of the snake, which also means it's 68 days until the next annular solar eclipse. Now that is crazy. I mean, I rarely see a string of dates line up like this for a single day. This is very rare occurrence for me. I've been doing this for 200 and something weeks straight. This is wild. So I know these elites, they scheduled this FOMC to land in this exact week many years in advance. And lastly, consider that after this FOMC, Fed Chair Powell only has 3 more FOMC meetings left before he gets the boot. And what do they say? 3 times a charm. Now, before we move on to the 3 XRP scenarios that I promised to share with you all in today's Red Pill, I want you to listen closely to what I'm about to say because I think it'll be important for us moving forward regarding the Federal Reserve and the final FOMC meeting of, well, the final FOMC meetings with Jay Powell on the throne. Here's my quick outlook on what's to come. So please pay attention to this. So I could imagine once we make it through this upcoming FOMC meeting, which will be this upcoming Wednesday, very soon, the market will likely start, quote, pricing in, unquote, 2 things. One of those things being the speculation around the new Fed chairman's future decisions and agenda. Keep in mind, that could impact the market starting, well, impacted directly from the new Fed chair, starting from mid-May 2026 after Jerome Powell's term is up. I believe it's up on May 15th, but specifically at the June 2026 FOMC, which is about a half a year out from now. So there's plenty of time for speculation solely on just that, on just what I said. So again, once we have awareness of who the new Fed chair is going to be, there's already going to be speculation and pricing in of that. Okay, now the second thing being the pricing in of QE, of quantitative easing. Now that the Fed has officially ended QT a week ago, quantitative tightening, everyone's now expecting the Fed to move into QE soon. So the speculation around the specifics on that will of course be wild. So these are 2 things to consider moving forward because they'll be the talk of the town. And that's not me sharing some insider information with you. I'm just letting you know every influencer, every crypto analyst will be foaming out the mouth talking about those 2 things from here on out. Okay? These are very boring things for me, but of course, because everybody talks about it, then you guys want to know my opinion, and then I share my thoughts and I try to share the esoteric outlook. But I'm just letting you know now. Remember how annoying it was to talk about tariffs? Now all you're going to hear is everyone talk about this. It's always a new fucking thing, okay? Sorry for my language, but this is kind of what we're about to start seeing, okay? So I'm just warning you. I'm not even trying to be funny right now. I'm just letting you know. If you got annoyed at hearing everyone talk about tariffs, get ready to get annoyed about everyone talking about QE and who the next Fed chair would be. It's really sad because it's like people worship the Fed without even knowing they're worshiping the Fed by just giving them power by caring about who the next Fed chair will be. It's strange, but whatever, man. Guess I just needed to share the clear pill there. So, of course, we want to be careful once everyone starts believing the same stuff, especially here in crypto land. So if they tell us, for example, that QE starts in March, which I'm not saying it will, but if they, for example, say that QE starts in March, then I'd expect us literally from the moment we hear about that all the way until March to rally. And then once we get there, we'd get the guillotine once QE actually starts. So essentially a sell the news. Now, of course, we'll keep our ear to the ground on this, even though we don't need to. Everybody's going to be talking about it. I'm just letting you know, I'm not here making any specific calls on when QE will actually begin. I don't really care. But what I did want to share with you all as early as possible was my theory surrounding the Fed conversations that are going on right now, and that will continue to amplify moving forward. And I'll, of course, continue to build off of this theory as things progress into the end of Powell's term. But for now, let's pivot over to these three scenarios I have for XRP, which was requested by members of our Mastermind community here after I shared my three scenarios I have for the Bitcoin plays in the short term. So in today's podcast, I'll be doing the same for XRP as requested, but it's very important before we move into those. Let me actually recap what those three scenarios are for Bitcoin with mashed potatoes. So before we move into those three scenarios, it's important we set the tone. Before we move into XRP, you're going to understand a lot better if I do this. So I know a lot of people over the past week are still wondering what those three scenarios were, even though I shared 2 weeks ago what they were, and I even did midweek market updates. So it's the only reason why I'm recapping, because people they're not catching this valuable information, and it's okay, but for hammering the point home, I get this kind of like there's a lot going on right now. Some people might be busy, but a lot of people take the things I say and kind of twist it around. And most of the time it's because they didn't even fully consume what it was that I shared. So it's necessary for us, similar to what we were doing with the Wyckoff accumulation stuff all the way during the March crash. I'm kind of doing that again here with these three scenarios for Bitcoin, and what we will start to continue to follow up on once we share the XRP scenarios. So let's go over the Bitcoin chart really quickly, and we have scenario number one. I'm just going to wipe all this out and just look at nothing but the candles. All right. Scenario number one was 47 days of sideways for Bitcoin between the levels of 80K to 100K, which is right there, right around the November 13th into November 14th candles. And the starting point for that 47-day clock was on November 21st, which was so far, as you can see, the bottom of the crash that lasted 47 days into the 47th week of the year. So this is why I'm isolating that number 47 and starting this countdown from that exact pivot date. And then that would lead us into the date of January 6th into January 7th, depending on if you count the end date or not. So that's right at the top of the new year, which is why I'm mentioning these two dates side by side, depending on how you measure it. We don't need to be super exact. Again, we're sharing this far in advance, so just keep these two dates in mind for that 47 code. Sometimes it lines up perfectly where it's 47 days without the end date. Sometimes it's 47 days with the end date. Again, this is all happening on a global scale anyways, so like people in Australia are hearing, or seeing things happen a day later, etc. Just keep that in mind. We're not trying to be perfect on the bullseye here, but that's still pretty crazy accuracy, if and how it turns out. So far, so far as we film today's podcast, we're now over 2 weeks from November 21st, and this actually seems to be the scenario that we're dealing with. And that's clear here because we've been getting resistance around 93 into 94K. We got this rejection over here leading into 93. Again, last week, we could be building up here. A lot of people are going to start calling for a bear flag. It's very common. This could even be perceived as a very micro bear flag, but we've seen these patterns turn out and then we get major moves to the upside too. So this is why I'm not pattern trading this and why I'm not making those calls right now, because I've seen especially crypto build a crazy pattern and then do the complete opposite. Whether descending, broadening wedge, head and shoulders, inverse head and shoulders, rising wedge, whatever, asymmetrical triangle, pennant, bear pennant, I've heard it all, okay? So this is actually stuff I teach in my advanced trading course. I'm really well versed on it, but the reason I don't put too much emphasis on it during these red pills is because it's not really how these things work. We've seen liquidation events happen in the midst of the most bullish patterns, okay? So for those that keep hearing analysts making these calls, just be careful there, all right? Because there's plenty of examples where you'd see invalidations on patterns. And I hope you appreciate me being direct about that stuff. It's not to call anyone out, it's just to help. So just putting emphasis on the fact that we're now over 2 weeks past that bottom so far. We're, as you can see, on day 17, heading into the third week. And scenario number one is playing out. It's the most accurate one that's playing out. And when I first shared these scenarios 2 weeks ago, back in the red pill that was actually shared on November 23rd. So right here, just a couple days after we had that bottom on November 21st, I mentioned that this specific scenario number 1, is very likely to be what actually happens. Hence why I made it the first scenario out of the 3. I was very clear about that at that time as well. And I also had something to back this up, which was the fact that if you take from the tariff crash bottom right over here on April 7th and you measure it over to May 23rd, let me quickly do that for you. So we have tariff crash bottom, we have May 23rd, and you're going to see they are 47 days apart. So 47 days after Bitcoin bottomed at 74K on the 4/7 date, Bitcoin hit a new all-time high. Like, crazy. And then it took Bitcoin 47 days before it broke out again to a new all-time high. Meaning Bitcoin traded sideways for 47 days after that extreme swing in price. So again, the stock market crashed for 47 days into the 4/7 date. Bitcoin bottomed at 74K on the 4/7 date. Then it proceeded to go up for 47 days and hit a new all-time high. And then it traded sideways for 47 days before hitting another new all-time high. And then recently it just crashed for 47 days from the all-time high into the 47th week of the year. So this is exactly what I mentioned in that red pill 2 weeks ago regarding what I'm calling scenario 1. So now that we've made an extreme price move to the downside, it would make sense to have a sideways, choppy price action for the next 47 days. And that would mean that for the next month, considering that today is December 7th, and we're talking about January 7th specifically, we could be seeing Bitcoin, quote unquote, range bound between 80K to 100K. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. A lot of people think that might be bad, but you need to realize that after we have a major crash across the board, stability is welcomed, all right? So just keep that in mind. It's very rare to see V-shaped recoveries. I mean, this recovery was rare, the one that we had. It's very rare. Of course, I would like that to happen again, but it's not how it works. So we got wiped out a lot on this liquidation event right here for the altcoins. That was a liquidation reset. And then this Bitcoin crash into the following month is what I'm calling a sentiment reset. And that's why in the last red pill, I called it the reset, because I feel like we're reset now. And after a reset, it's common to have a stabilization phase. And I think as we make it through this FOMC and make it into the next month, at the start of the new year, that will be the quote unquote stabilization phase. Now, before we move on to scenario number 2, I want to be very clear that this is not what I am wishing for. This isn't what I want to happen regarding scenario number 1. I'm just reviewing the patterns that have been playing out this year and sharing the data with you from a neutral angle. And I was very clear with you about this 2 weeks ago when I first presented these 3 Bitcoin scenarios. So now that that's been said, a scenario that I would actually like to see, that I would desire, is scenario number 2. So I'm being very vulnerable and clear with you right now. This is not the more likely, but this is the one that I would like to happen. Scenario number 2. And that would be a relief rally into about 105, maybe 109K, followed by a pullback into the mid to low 90K zone. Let's say even dipping as low as 88K again, which I know sounds pretty extreme. That's why I'm putting emphasis on the low 90K zone. So let's say around 93K to be a little bit more specific. And then during that pullback, we'd actually be planting a higher low after a lower high, making everyone feel like we're about to experience what is called a dead cat bounce, where we would drop lower than 80K and we would go even deeper into the 70K zone. But instead of that happening, we would have a recovery into 115K to 120K. And that, my friends, would confuse a lot of people, because we'd get the relief rally that some people are expecting now, but we wouldn't get the dead cat bounce to follow, which is what anybody who believes a relief rally is coming is expecting after. And then all the bears that were expecting us to drop immediately into like 60K before the end of the year all of them would feel wrong too, essentially making all the bears feel wrong at the same time. Because on the recovery to the 115 to 120K zone, all the leverage shorts would be wiped out, and any bears that weren't leverage trading would start FOMOing into that pump, just like they did in May earlier this year. So I personally feel this is the more contrarian expectation, and that's actually probably the more painful scenario too, with regards to anybody who's actively trading this market. That would be the most confusing. So that's why I'm actually wanting this scenario. Although the market isn't designed to give you or I what we want, I can still be transparent and share my own desires, of course. But I made this scenario number 2 for a reason, all right? So that's as honorable as I could be with this presentation here. But overall, I feel like I did present some solid points to consider regarding sentiment, which is probably the most overlooked concept in investing, especially in the present moment when market conditions are extremely polarizing, which they clearly have been. Now, lastly, we have scenario number 3. It's not the one I'm anticipating, hence why I put it number 3. It is a V-shaped recovery and a new all-time high, like what happened in April leading into May earlier this year, with the timing of that new all-time high into the end of the year, but likely January. And if I had to be specific, I'd consider January 6th or 7th. That would be following that 47-day theme that I shared with you earlier. But in my opinion, if we are to make another new all-time high for Bitcoin, it would actually make more sense to be around the January new moon, which would be around January 18th, 2026. As I doubt we'll hit a new all-time high as soon as the December new moon. I highly doubt that, considering how close in proximity we already are to that date, and Bitcoin is a ways away from 126K. Also, keep in mind that January 16th, which is within 48 hours of January new moon, will be 47 days before the final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle on March 3rd. So, keeping up with the 47-day theme. Again, this would be including the end date. So just look at it that way, right around that January new moon time frame. And I'm tying it to that significant astrological event of the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. Now, scenario 3 is, of course, the most bullish scenario and the most extreme in the other direction. So this is why I made it number 3. Although it's less likely, Bitcoin does love extremes. So this scenario can't be counted out, just like it would have looked dumb to count that out as a possibility in mid-April after watching Bitcoin rampage from 74K all the way up to a new all-time high in just a little over a month. Again, Bitcoin loves to surprise everyone. So consider this my surprise scenario. And to wrap this up, if you remember the red pill from a couple weeks ago, I mentioned a bonus scenario that would essentially utilize the same key dates, which could be marking the quote end of the altcoin bear market tied to the final phase of our lunar cycle, which has everything to do with the final lunar eclipse of our lunar cycle on March 3rd that I just mentioned, the last total lunar eclipse that we'll have all the way until New Year's Day in 2029, meaning we're about to move into the longest solar cycle Bitcoin and crypto have ever experienced, and that's huge. And this fact could be very well the reason why we didn't have the traditional extremely overbought Bitcoin rally, followed by the breakdown in Bitcoin dominance, which leads to what we call an alt season. The setup into the next solar cycle and how short-lived this current lunar cycle was could very well be the key to that. And I believe we'll have everything we need to make a call on this with a pretty high level of precision once we actually conclude this month of December and kick off the new year in 2026. Because in all past lunar cycles, we saw a bottoming structure formed on Bitcoin as early as 2 months prior. Around 55 days was the longest, with 2 iterations happening within 40 days and only 1 iteration happening on the final week of the lunar eclipse. So that would mean as we're entering the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, that's where the most bearish price action concludes. So that'll likely be where we're bottoming in the month of January and as late as March. And that's a lot sooner than some people are envisioning. So when people are wondering why this cycle feels so different and why it's so weird, well, it's always a good time for me to go back to my lunar and solar cycle theory. And it's this chart right here, which I've been talking about quite a lot lately. But I'll share that, maybe more information regarding that in the next week's Red Pill if you guys are interested. But for now, as promised, we need to move on to XRP, starting with scenario number 1, which would also be 47 days of sideways price action at these levels that we're in now. And the reason being is XRP is also tied to the 47 code because XRP equals 15 in Gematria, and what I would consider one of the most important ciphers, the Chaldean cipher. And the number 47 is the 15th prime number. And remember how April 7th this year was the start of the 15th week of the year, right there. 47 code, 15th prime number. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Regarding this 47 code, it also matters for XRP. So this couldn't have been any more of a perfect timing for a controlled demolition back on April 7th and during this recent 47th week of the year. And what's so crazy is if you measure from April 7th on XRP, they do it over here. Over to this date over here of July 18th. You see that top date? And they are 103 days apart. And this 103 is tied to the gematria of Mercury. 103. If you have my crypto decoding blueprint, which is included for free within my decoding mastermind course, you'll know that I consider XRP the Mercury of the crypto market regarding this whole kind of like connection to mythology and how there is a clear connection for not only crypto, but all the other things that are happening in these markets, including these Mag 7 stocks that, you know, are pretty much holding up the entire stock market right now. Everything like gold, silver, all the precious metals, palladium, platinum, etc. They're all playing a role here. So there's some additional elements beyond mythology that you could utilize, such as the periodic table. And in this case, we have a element named right after one of these mythological archetypes. And I believe XRP is tied directly to Mercury. Just consider Mercury is the fastest planet, and it's also known as the messenger. Two things that XRP is known for: its fast transactions and utility for cross-border payments. And even how we always hear about XRP and ISO 222. Well, ISO 222 is essentially a standardized format for financial messages. And for ease of communication between financial institutions worldwide. Again, it's tied back to the theme of communication. The messenger. This is very mercurial. Also, it has the gematria to back it up. We have this 103 right there in Mercury. That's the 27th prime number. We also have Ripple as the 27 in Chaldean. Of course, we always talk about Ripple and water symbolism. Well, out of the metals, Mercury is liquid. It's colloidal actually, but like the point here is that it's not like gold. It's not like silver. It's not like palladium or bronze. It's liquid, right? So this is talking about liquidity. Anyways, we have Ripple giving you the 40 and the 86. Just pay attention. In the same cipher as Mercury, 40 and 86. So because we had an insanely bearish Mercury retrograde recently, and then the crypto market literally bottomed on the final day of that Mercury retrograde, it's making me look forward to the next Mercury retrograde, since it'll be the first Mercury retrograde of the new year, and it lands in the midst of the next eclipse season. And we just had an ultra bearish eclipse season with Mercury retrograde combo earlier this year in March and April. This is giving me that like as above, so below expectation. Like, we had a really shitty March, April this year. What if things look glorious in March and April of next year, which would be the same setup like we had in the year 2020 and 2021, the years that were the final years of Trump's presidency in his first term, while here it would be the beginning years of his presidency in his second term. So we had March, C19 crash for Bitcoin. This is March of 2021. And that was effectively where we started to top out. As above, so below. A perfect mirror. This was the worst. This was the best. We've had this mirror happen actually a couple of times. We had over here, we had March, April of 2024, March, April of 2025. Very bullish, very bearish. We had a very bullish November into December of 2024. We had a very bearish November into December this year. So it's making me feel that they're just playing opposites here. And that's why I'm opening up my eyes to this. And I'm not trying to just give you hopium. This isn't hopium. All right. They're doing this for a reason, because it's all about the snake year, and it's all about us, the snake shedding its skin. And we've moved from dragon, reptile, to snake, reptile. And now we're moving into a completely new essence. Fire horse. So this is a time of change, and we're watching it happen in front of our eyes, especially with all the developments we've had in artificial intelligence over the past 2 years. So now getting back to this, it's kind of like the thesis that we could be having an absolutely legendary March next year, like the opposite of the March, April that we had this year. And also something to keep in mind was the first Mercury retrograde of 2021 was really that final rally. Let me quickly show you. Right here. So we had our first Q1 Mercury retrograde. That was the final major rally for Bitcoin. We didn't really go much higher than that until we collapsed, and even in the double top. So I'm just kind of bringing up some of this stuff because this was also one of the big moves that triggered alt season. And we need to keep that in mind. So as you're all aware now, 47 days after the recent flush in November 27th, or sorry, November 1st, right over here. Let me actually get back to this chart. I had a cleaner chart we were looking at. So we have 47 days after that flush. We have leading into Jan 6th, Jan 7th. But what I think would make this move more unique for XRP, get back to the XRP chart. Actually, this one is what I like most right now. What would make this more unique for specifically XRP is considering the fact that all of the biggest moves for XRP are usually completed in about 4 weeks, 28 days. And that 4-week move is always happening when Bitcoin dominance is falling. So this needs to be considered because Bitcoin dominance was at its strongest in December of 2017 and in December of 2020, moving into very, very beginning of January 2021. But most of its most dominant move was in December. We're in December right now. And that was right before it started to collapse, of course. And once that moment occurs, we can pretty much start the clock on the XRP pump because it usually starts rallying for a time frame of 28 days from that exact moment when Bitcoin dominance starts getting weak. It's almost immediate. And sometimes XRP is a leader in that move, like it was last year in November. And as of today, XRP has held this $2 range for a full year now. And that is a huge milestone, especially for anybody who has invested in the prior years. And after trading all this time at this level, it makes the current fractal that we're seeing now for XRP very similar to what happened in 2017, which was this sideways move we had over here before it went up in a straight line. And funny enough, that sideways boring price action, it concluded in the month of December before it rallied for, guess what, 28 days. And it always does this. So if you feel like this is random when I say 28 days, it was the same thing we just had over here. See, 28 days. Pretty much the same thing over here too. So it just loves this kind of crazy straight line breakout that lasts about 4 weeks, or just 1 month if you wanted to keep it simple. So now that brings me to scenario number 2, which aligns with scenario number 2 for Bitcoin as well. And there's a reason why I'm aligning them this way, because it'll all make much more sense. It'll be much more thorough and holistic, I suppose. So this has to do with the relief rally concept, except the timing for this will be different for XRP, because usually when Bitcoin enters a quote unquote relief rally, when it enters a relief rally phase, it initially gains strength in Bitcoin dominance. So Bitcoin dominance will go up. And like I told you already, Bitcoin dominance was at its strongest in December 2017 and through December 2020, before the last 2 alt seasons. And in both of those iterations, Bitcoin was dealing with a notable correction. So it was during an extreme volatile time for Bitcoin, and the timing of the move was pretty much the same cycle to cycle, effectively. It was the same. So here we are in December. We've had a major volatile move recently for Bitcoin, the biggest correction we've had in the entire cycle so far for Bitcoin. That is something that can't go unnoticed. Of course, it's not going unnoticed, because that's why everybody's calling for a bear market now. So we're in extremes, right? And it's after such an extreme move in price and an extreme flip in sentiment and an extremely oversold RSI on even higher time frames, when you start wanting to look at Bitcoin dominance, like when you really want to start paying attention to Bitcoin dominance. And this scenario number 1 for XRP would be around another month of chop between $1.80 to $2.50, for example. I should have mentioned that earlier. So just to remind you all, the specifics on XRP for the move into early January would be around $1.80, which we've already kind of planted those lows back on November 21st, into around $2.50, for example, while scenario 2 would be actually breaking higher than $2.50, and we would start heading towards $2.70, right at where this white line is, to $2.80, where we would have some resistance, in my opinion, because we can see up here, we initially were trying to hold this level. We got rejected from this level multiple times. And then also at this level, we were getting some support before a major correction. So that can flip as resistance. And that'd be the perfect area for it to become resistance. Because in my scenario number 2, it would be a move up to like 270, 280. And then when Bitcoin gets rejected, we would see XRP come back to around $220 to $230 zone before the recovery up. And during the recovery, we would likely see a $3 XRP again, coming back up to that really uncomfortable territory of $3 for the bears, which would create the same FOMO effect as it would for Bitcoin and the rest of the alt market for that matter. And this would be my preferred scenario for XRP, although as of right now, scenario number 1 is the more likely scenario to play out. And as mentioned, we'll need to get through this FOMC meeting on Wednesday to have more clarity on the specifics. But we can legitimately have 47 days of sideways into the beginning of January, and that could be the pivot where we see a move like that for XRP. And it's just Bitcoin dominance rolls over and we start the timer, and it's 4 weeks of just craziness for the alts. January is the month that likes to happen in anyways. We can even see over here, this was into January when we really made the final part of the move, which took another 180 days, like a half a year for us to get just slightly higher. But imagine for anyone positioned over here leading into Trump's selection, that was a majority of the move right there completed by January. All right. So something to that. Also, January 2021 had the same effect. Okay. So we're pretty caught up right now. We have scenario number 1 dialed, the concept of trading at around 180 to 250 zone until the January 6th, January 7th dates. It's very specific dates I'm giving you, very specific prices. And then I'm mentioning the scenario number 2, breaking higher into 270, 280, rejection down to 220, 230, and then coming back up to 3 in that fashion. That would create a lot of problems for anyone actively trading. It would be very confusing. It would align with scenario number 2 that I have for Bitcoin very nicely. So for those who are looking to de-risk XRP, which I am not going to be doing at this time, but for those who are looking to de-risk XRP, just consider the zone between 260 to around 295. Staggering orders there would be conservative for those who believe the cycle is over. But for me personally, which by the way, that's, you're entitled to that feeling. I get it. We're at a very weird time right now, so there's no desire that I have to change your mind or change your opinion. That I could care less about doing that for you. Okay? I'm just letting you know personally, with all the XRP that I've accumulated in my time, most of it sub 40 cents, I'm sticking to this play until it's complete. Personally, I might be wrong. I've been wrong before. I might be wrong. We might get to 295 and we might keel over and go all the way down to $1 again. I mean, we can't say it's impossible because look at this washout. And this wasn't just one exchange that this washout happened on. It happened on a lot of them. But the absorption and the way that we've been holding $2 shows me a ton of strength here. So again, based on where I've personally accumulated, where I'm at in my portfolio and how much I've been up on XRP, I'm letting this play out to its finality, even if it takes more time than I anticipated. And I personally feel XRP has a major move to the upside ahead, but it has to be timed with Bitcoin dominance because it always is. And I've always said that. It's taking longer than I expected, but this shorter lunar cycle really hit altcoins hard, specifically altcoins. And with this lunar cycle coming to a conclusion soon, this actually makes me optimistic that we're going to have a very surprising 2026. That Brenner cycle chart might actually be spot on for that year. It's not always spot on, but that might be the year where it's actually spot on. Now, my third and final scenario that I'm expecting for XRP is like a straight line breakout happening later this month. Given the market responds positively to the upcoming FOMC on Wednesday and speculators start pricing in QE immediately, then we can have XRP do what it did at the end of last year, where we had that final FOMC meeting right after the US selection results came in when Trump won. And then we just, boom, straight line breakout. We saw XRP, HBAR, XLM, a couple of other plays just rally in a straight line for like 4 weeks straight. Pretty much most of them finished off their move in that final 4 weeks. That would basically line up at the exact same time as the completion of those 47 days that I mentioned. And let me show you. Because we're talking about scenario number 1 when we mentioned the 47-day concept. And watch. When I take 28 days after the next FOMC, I land on January 7th. It's like, couldn't get any more perfect. So you have the timing for this move as well. Because I told you scenario number 1 for both Bitcoin and XRP would be concluding around that 6th or 7th of January. And here you are seeing 4 weeks from the upcoming FOMC lands perfectly on that date as well. So it can't get more perfect than that, especially because it was right around that time back in 2018 that XRP hit its all-time high. And the all-time high that we're still kind of battling with since. It's been going on for 8 years now. January 4th, 2026 will actually be the 8-year anniversary of that moment, by the way, that crazy syringe top that we had for XRP, where it went up from December 9th to January 4th. Who cares about the dates? Pretty much 4 weeks, it went up 1,500%. I mean, if we even did half of that, like if we even did 700% from here, just so people could wrap their minds around this, we would be hitting around $15, which that would be face melting. That would be why, that'd be crazy, right? Remember, we see those moves when people least expect it. Right now, people are insanely bearish and believing that we're ending off this cycle exactly like we did in 2021. Many are. So we've proven this cycle that we've been doing a lot of things differently, starting with Bitcoin hitting a new all-time high before the halving, starting with also Bitcoin hitting perpetual new all-time highs into price discovery without ETH or Solana doing anything. We also saw an isolated run in all the quote unquote ISO tokens, even though they're not really ISO tokens, but just XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR, etc. They were all rallying in November of 2024 last year, but privacy coins didn't do shit. And now privacy coins are moving. You understand what's happening here, family? This is a very different alt rotation vibe. It is all catching up, in my opinion. So I think the next move is going to be very shocking. It's going to be very quote unquote caught off guard, but it will be likely tied to this upcoming FOMC because that's how they played it in the last cycle. And that's also how they've been playing it quite a bit lately. So a lot will be lining up for XRP into the new year, especially given where Bitcoin dominance is at in the conversation and the fact that XRP had one of the strongest years, at least when considering how resilient it's been compared to most of the altcoin market. Pretty much anyone who bought in before November 2024 last year is sitting in solid profits, and you held those profits for most of the year, while many altcoins are even lower than where we were trading at before the November 2024 selection. And because of that resilience is why I'm personally I'm not going to adjust my investment thesis for XRP at this time. I'll continue to weather the storm. It might be, and I'm admitting, it might be a hard-headed thing. I might be very wrong, okay? I'm putting it out there. I might be very wrong. I might be very hard-headed by saying this and by acting this way. But guys, I sold the exact top here in April of 2021, and it's on my channel at the very beginning to prove it. When I was doing that, I was getting crucified. All throughout that time, I said the SEC case doesn't matter at all. We had this moment. I had a bunch of de-risking targets set up. You could go look inside of the Discord and the what I'm buying and selling to prove that. Swiped through a bunch, pretty much completely de-risked, and then I bought in all at this 50-cent level. Again, reaccumulated. And then we lifted off effectively from the 50-cent level. So once it started getting below 60 cents again, I bought back in everything after already making insane profits because I was buying all the way back here, 30 cents. So from 30 to 80, back to between 50 to 60, and then now all the way up to 2. After already having a crazy bag sold at 160 to 180, and then my average buy-in at the time was 25 cents. So I get it. I might sound hard-headed, but trading XRP is like my thing. So I'm not trying to flex. I'm not trying to be that guy. It's my thing. I've been very successful with this coin, all while avoiding the XRP army cult in the process. So I'm admitting to you all, and it might sound like a rant, but I see resilience in this chart. I am bullish on this chart. And that's why I'm not going to adjust my investment thesis. I feel like, Leonardo DiCaprio in that scene of Wolf of Wall Street where he's like smashing his head with the microphone. He's like, I'm not selling. Like, that's how I feel right now. And maybe I need to make more content about this because I feel like specifically XRP people have felt like, the lowest of the low lately. And that's actually where I get excited. When I start noticing people are giving up and they're feeling like crap and the depression's kicking in, that's actually, as investors, when you should get giddy. This is like something Warren Buffett and Charlie and like all the greats, Lynch have been teaching. Like, this is it, man. Everyone's feeling like crap right now. So you have to know how to embrace that pain. It's teaching you, seriously. I'm not just trying to be like woo-woo right now, all right? So of course I'll get into everything more as things progress, but as of right now, I'm seeing resilience. It's why I'm not adjusting my investment thesis. I'll continue to weather the storm until my exit strategy is ready to deploy. But for now, I hope you all appreciated that thorough review of the top 3 scenarios I have for XRP in the short term. We could also call these my top 3 expectations in order. Of course, these expectations are not financial advice, just what I'm personally seeing in the charts and how I'm feeling about the market at this time. So now let's wrap up the traditional analysis by checking in on Ethereum, and then I'll actually do just a quick local TA on Bitcoin before moving into the altcoins that you all voted on. We see Bitcoin's at 91. This is good to see. I'm seeing some recovery for the most part in a lot of altcoins. ETH is just kind of chugging along back above 3,000. I really like to see that. Let's look at the weekly close. Weekly close, we were able to cement a second week, apologies, of closing, which is making this look more like a recovery structure, especially after how oversold we started to get on these smaller time frames. So let me see where the moving averages are. All right, so we do have this EME band in a bearish posture, but when we get these on ETH, we really want to see where they are on Bitcoin first, especially when we see Bitcoin dominance in the 60% range. I wouldn't take so much what we're seeing on ETH for the weekly moving averages so seriously. Again, we've just been seeing a very sideways ETH now going all the way back to 2021. And when I zoom out, you could see it for yourself. So a lot of people are wondering my thoughts on ETH, and so many pattern traders out there aren't even noticing this crazy inverse head and shoulders we have here with left shoulder head and right shoulder forming. And what makes this a very bullish pattern is the fact that we do have higher highs on the weekly. So we have many higher weekly candle closes than the ones that we had back in 2024 and obviously 2023. So this is actually quite a bullish setup. And another thing is when we made it back to the all-time high of 2018, it wasn't just like clear skies ahead. We actually got some pretty brutal chop. We could see that week right there. When I zoom in, it was a 26% correction for ETH right there. I mean, it's maybe not as shitty as it's been lately, but I'm just letting you know. This is not just clear skies ahead vibe. So we made it back to the all-time high, a clear bull trap, because we've since had a notable correction. It's probably 50%. All right, we got a 46%. Actually, I think I remember it being 47%. On a lot of exchanges, it was 47%. It's so fucked up. Like, that they do this, dude. It's not even funny, actually. Like, it's kind of fucked up that they do this. It's just nice to know the code, you know? And of course, to be more savvy with the code year by year. And I'm getting better I'm getting as refined as possible. You know, I'm definitely not perfect. I'm just, I guess, one of the few that are realizing these patterns. And the more I study, the more I learn I don't know, you know? But we are seeing that pattern develop, in my opinion, and for the most part holding structure. So until structure is broken, I will not flip bearish on ETH. And I still feel like a new all-time high is ahead with an alt season generally. Might not be the crazy alt season that we had from here to here, but I do remember structurally it felt very weird to have the C19 crash and then we went higher after it, just like we had the tariff crash and we went higher after it. I suspect we're probably somewhere in this kind of vibe where we overextended and they needed to wash out. So we're dealing with the washout now. And we're actually back testing some of the previous levels that we were stalled out at. All of this cluster here post spring. So this would be called a test in Wyckoff, but not exactly. I'm just giving you guys some ideas here. Yeah, let's move on. I just want to look at Bitcoin really quickly. Bitcoin, we can see bearish on the weekly moving averages for sure. And when it comes to the monthly chart and Bitcoin closing below the 13 EMA, which it already did, now we're seeing some hold on the 21 EMA. But generally, what we're seeing after we get these major corrections is that we like to come back up to the 55. And the 55 is in the same zone as the 13, 34, and 21. We've had the wolf cross to the downside. I don't love to see that because the last time we saw that was the start of the last bear market. We talked about this as well. So we can see that cross, and what happens after that cross is we come back to the culprit of the whole thing, which is the 55, and then we see, do we get rejected there or do we recover there? Now in my scenario number two, because the 55 moving average sits at 102K, like 101, we would actually be getting higher than it. But then again, we would be coming below it after because there's a rejection that follows. What would be different is instead of just crashing lower, we would hold on like 93K and then we would pop up higher. So it'd be one of the rare instances where we actually get below the 55 and then we actually get back above it. We haven't done this yet, but the funny thing is, we haven't had a cycle like this one yet either. All the time before this, we never had a new all time high before the halving. Lately, we have. So there's so many weird things. Pi cycle top indicator never went off. We've had even a lot of stuff on all the stock to flow charts that are completely unusual. So Bitcoin dominance completely different as well. So it's just a different cycle in that way, and that's to be expected as time goes on. So at this time, I'm just going to stick to the scenarios that I shared, regardless of all these bullish indicators. And I'm under the belief that it will take us some time to get out of this. I am not actually so much expecting just full-blown recovery straight away. But as I was saying, this FOMC meeting is big, the one that's coming up. And that would not be completely weird for them to give us like what's called a Santa rally into Christmas. So let's get on to these altcoins for today. We're starting with Dent. I don't remember the last time I covered this one, but let's see what we're working with today. We probably have some drawing tools. Yes, we do. We're going to go to the 5-day, get a nice big picture. Okay, so we already had a major fib pull from swing high to swing low in the last cycle of 2017. Here we can see that the last time Dent was really bullish was actually back in April 2021, and it came up right to the top of the golden pocket. That actually is called an automatic rally. So we have a buying climax, we have a selling climax, we have an automatic rally, and what we're getting now, in my opinion, is called a spring. And the way a spring concludes is with a V shape, but then we have a little bit of like fuckery before we have an SOS. So it's very weird that we have some of these charts doing this because, for example, XRP completed a macro SOS recently. Just pay attention to this. High, lower high, rejection, and then we got above wherever that level is for XRP. Let me show you. Turn off everything. Go to like the 5-day. All right. So we have high, crash, lower high, not as deep of a crash, held support, and then we got above that level there, the automatic rally, and now we're treating it as support. Well, Dent is going to do that, and that's going to be awesome. So we have the high, the lower high. We have the high, the lower high. We're in this shit right now for Dent. And we actually did not break all the way back to like the C19 lows, but we could see it's getting shaky. It's like about kind of like in this later stages. But again, a lot of altcoins are looking really bad right now. So you have this C19 crash here. And I think that's probably about as deep as it starts getting. I think maybe this wick needs to get filled as it has. And now that this wick is pretty much completely filled for Dent, this should be in the process of recovery actually. So the speed of this move in recovery, just consider, look at how bad it looked on January 1st of 2021. Guys, do you know what Bitcoin was doing on January 21st, 2021? Look at where Dent was. Now let me show you where Bitcoin was. January 1st. I'm going to zoom out. Just C19 crash. This is January 1st, man. All of these weeks of rallying. Look at what Dent was doing. Nothing. It looked like shit. This is what altcoins do, man. They look like horrifying until they go boop. That is the thing they do to you. Look at this shit. They made you wait all the way until New Year's Day. All the way until New Year's Day. And then the second we flipped into the new calendar year, 12,000%. Oh my God. If we even did half of that, 6,000%, you'd be fucking like, what did I just experience? This is how it goes in crypto, man. This is not like weird for altcoins. Look at that, 35,000%. 13,000%. You can't do it again? Why not? Why can't it do it again? Literally, why can't it do it again? Even if it was half the amount, 3,000 from here. You guys mad about 3,000% move? I wouldn't be. So I'm not calling for that, but I'm just letting you know this is kind of like we're looking so bad right now. We could see a lot of things breaking structure that was holding for quite a while. And this is sort of the environment that I start to get, okay, like it's feeling a little trappy now for the bear agreement. Yeah, so I think structurally we're actually going to get something that could be mimicking what XRP has experienced, but maybe not all the way back above the 888. I'm not calling for that. I'm definitely not calling for that. I would even look to the retest of the 702 again. So hitting 1 cent, a little above 1 cent, for example, and that'd be a wild move from where we are right now. So anybody who's never accumulated DEMP before, if we only went to just 1 cent, that would be a 4,000% move from here. And you can't deny that this liquidity has been tapped before. Only thing is it's been a long time since it's happened. So the only way this is possible is with a full-blown actual alt season. And that was the last time we had one. By the way, this was when Bitcoin was like 63K. And this is when Bitcoin was 8K. So this was much down and on a downtrend, starting a downtrend when Bitcoin was still very strong. So that's also why I think we can see these random altcoins just look horrible, very horrible until there's an actual real alt season. And they hit you super randomly. Now we're going to look at a project I've never looked at before. Quantum resistant ledger. What is this gem? This is wild. It's been just really going up since the bear market. So, for example, just so you guys are aware, this was the bear market bottom for, I want to say, Ethereum. This was the bear market bottom for Bitcoin. Effectively, it recovered. So this is not like the greatest looking project on earth, but if you look at all things considered, where it is today, it's actually up quite a bit from like what we call the majority of the bear market for crypto. But there's cryptos right now that are all the way still very low, and this one is just moseying on up to new highs. What's going on with that? That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, it's clearly extremely volatile. This was a 50% correction, but the trend is your friend until the end, my boy. So this has been a pivot right here, November 2023, up 2,000%. And it's not structurally weird to me, the way that it's effectively filling out everything from back in 2018. So that's the only thing that I can say is that if you bought this thing in the last cycle, or sorry, the 2017 cycle, you're just now breaking even. That's not nice. But if you bought anything after the C19 crash, even if you bought the top, like dent over here, is still much lower than where this project is at highs. It's higher than if you bought the 2021 alt season highs. Like even if you bought the absolute top, today you're still up 200%. That's great. I mean, you're not outpacing inflation, but it's still fucking awesome for a speculative investment. So thanks to whoever voted on this chart. We isolated this project because we always want to try to include at least one new coin every week. We're not picking favorites. We just want to cover at least one brand new token every week, and this was the one. Quantum resistant ledger. Never heard of it. Very interesting chart. Now, one thing I just want to quickly do is just pull a fib, and then we'll move on. But okay, yeah, so we've hit the 888. That's like about where I would say, yeah, like it's enough. But the structure is just consistently pulling back, maybe 50-60%, and then it's pulling up again. I think Caspa was not doing something like this necessarily, but Caspa had that vibe. Caspa totally had that vibe a couple of years ago, where it was like pushed up a bunch, had a 40-50% correction, then it pushed up again, 40-50% correction. It was just zigzagging towards the upside. Obviously they're not the same chart, but I'm just giving you an idea of like what the overall theme. It was trending up with major corrections along the way, but still it just kept going up. which is a hodl experience. It's great to hodl, right? If you could just hold through the pain on those mini corrections, you get to be back up in a couple months. I mean, what's wrong with that? Crypto is typically going on 80, 90% corrections that last years, while this one's been looking pretty damn good from pretty much the start of 2023. So cool looking chart. One thing I would say is this will absolutely go into price discovery. Unlike a lot of other projects, I mean, it's like knocking on heaven's door. So I'm not calling for this $80 thing. I don't see that. One thing I will potentially entertain is a local fib pull, excuse me. A local fib pull right here, which is, yeah, it's getting me back to the all-time high. So yeah, I can't work with this too much regarding upside targets at this time beyond price discovery, just because we have such limited data. Like, it's just here and there's no way it's going to 80. So I mean, of course anything's possible in the matrix, but it would be a big move. It'd be a big move. The 4618, maybe the 6 spot fib extension, maybe $25, maybe. But then again, dude, that's a huge fucking move from here. So I'll say 7. I'll say 7. Just a little bit kiss above the 1618. I'd say 7. Let's move on. Cool chart though. Really cool chart. Now we're going to move on to Velo. Velo is one of those projects that a lot of people keep asking me about. I don't love this chart just because, look at this free fall. It effectively, from November 2020 to December 2022, it lost 99.9% of it. So it lost all of its value. And then it rose in this parallel channel in like effectively a crazy macro bear flag, which again, I'm not going to put all my chips on a pattern, but we started breaking below that. And once we broke below that support line, we've now dropped again on Velo, likely filling the wick down to 004. And we got rejected at the perfect key level, which we were holding on to for a moment before this took another major drop. So you can see it got here on January 21st, and then it held for 135 days, but it couldn't hold. Sunk even deeper. And why that level's so important is look at the launch price. So we started just testing price discovery to the downside. It didn't work. It just kept going way, way, way. This is like another 90%. Look, it's another 97% drop from there. So the fact that we gravitated back up to it and got rejected, that's not a good look for me. It's not a good look. So Velo, I mean, I'm just being a real one here. Like, we got pretty close to the point, to the 6 cent target, above 5 cents. I would avoid speculating too much on this, but just keep in mind that if we come up even back to this original area of interest at 4 cents, that's a 600% move. And if we can get back to around this cluster on the highs, let's call it 5 cents on the nose, that's a 700% move. It's just a hard call on this particular project when there's all the other projects to look at. Is this really the play? Well, when I look at a chart like this, I say no. Now, some of you out there do a lot of research. Maybe you watch a lot of content creators that know a lot more about this than I do, but I'm looking at the chart right now, and this chart is not speaking to me. So I would avoid, unless I'm playing venture capital. So we're talking 1 to 2% max in the portfolio. And any more than that, you really want to make sure that you're careful, with regards to the entire conversation for your financial situation. So 1 to 2% for somebody that doesn't have a lot to lose is a lot, I hope this is making sense. While somebody who has a lot of money, 1 to 2% might be just a silly amount in that particular project. So you could even reduce it more. Now we're looking at Quant, and Quant had a crazy bottom. Very, very fast bottoming effect in 2022, along with ETH. And it's something I've been thinking about lately, how like it bottomed in 280 days. And a lot of altcoins recently have had these crazy crashes that have taken a year to complete since Trump became president, since he was inaugurated. And it's making me think, like, are we in the midst of doing a similar bottoming move to the altcoin bear market of 2022? It's highly probable, actually, because of how bad the crypto market has become. And interest is super low. Google Analytics for crypto and isolated cryptos, including Bitcoin, is way lower than it used to be. So retail isn't interested anymore. And it's right at that moment where they do a lot of accumulation, the people who run this world, and then they get retail to care again with FOMO because of price. The last time we had that effect was pretty much at the end of last year. We haven't felt that way since. And we've been getting some heavy chop and even some of these somewhat successful projects like Quant. Going back to 2021, we're at the same price that we are today. So clearly Bitcoin was a better buy, and I believe also XRP was a better buy. So I will not be putting any money into Quant, just because I feel like I already have my XRP going. I cannot see a huge difference on this particular chart, which makes me go, I mean, I should finish my sentence. I don't see a particularly different, I don't see much of a difference on this chart compared to a lot of other charts. Now the question is the utility and the use case, right? I don't really buy into so much in the quant conversation as much as I would on something like HBAR or XLM with my secondary and tertiary buys after XRP. And I would even rather go with Dogecoin, which is way crazy speculative, and definitely a lot of people will chuckle at that, but I have my own take on what's going on there. And I think generally, whenever we have a quote unquote alt season, memes, including Doge, just do really, really well. You know, they just always do. So I would rather be invested in a cultural moment than over diversified in a bunch of stuff that I believe has utility. This was my biggest mistake and many people's biggest mistake in 2021. They over invested in a bunch of stuff that they thought had all this use case, all this utility, and it didn't do shit. Meanwhile, things that had zero utility were killing it. You know, we even saw in this cycle what Pepe did, you know, and what all that pump fund crazy shit was leading up to the Trump inauguration. So we're still in the midst of very peak speculative vibes. Although we have been a full year since that moment, it's going to return again in some way, shape, or form. It'll just be a different cultural moment. So this quant chart has effectively been very sideways. It's been holding structure, so I guess like in that way it's very stable, but it's acting more stable than I would like personally for an investment that I'm speculating on. As for the levels, it's kind of the same conversation whenever I had my last red pill, because it would have been the same answer to the red pill before that and before that and before that, going all the way back to the creation of my channel. That's how little quant is done. So that's not negative. It's just, it is what it is. It has to break above 155, and then we would have probably a clear move up to 250, and then we could reassess. And the last one, which I'm very excited to make some comments on because I haven't looked at this chart in a while, but this one goes out to Squeaky Doorknob, a very appreciated member of the Waters Above Wolfpack. Nobody knows who he is. He's probably a Fed. He's absolutely a legend. Maybe he's Elon. Who knows? But I am actually pulling out this project because it has such a massive conspiracy around it. And I wonder why, because look at this price. Like, we're really, really, really like rock bottom here. And I think these are the types of projects that you just wake up one day and they break out in a straight line. And you're like, why is this happening? When that's kind of like what I'm going to anticipate that happens on this. Or maybe it doesn't. I don't own any Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. I don't believe a fucking word this guy Craig says. It's all a joke to me. But when something looks this bad, eventually it has a moment of sunshine and it looks very glorious. So I won't be buying any Bitcoin Satoshi Vision or Bitcoin Cash. I haven't bought any Bitcoin in a very long time, even regular Bitcoin. Most of the Bitcoin that I hold now is just in a SEP-IRA crypto account, one of my trade secrets. But yeah, this project is absolutely hilarious to me. How it has such a massive community. People think it's the real Bitcoin. The chart is not so nice. It looks like the back of like a prehistoric fake dinosaur. I don't know what to say about this chart, but this filling of the gap all the way down to this major move in June 2023 is a sign of selling exhaustion, and this is eventually going to bottom out soon at this level. Like, it can't really get much worse. I would not invest in this thing either, and I don't feel even bad for the community behind Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. I just wanted to end today's podcast giving this a mention so that Squeaky can know that, like, hey man, I did it for you, and that's your favor for the he didn't even ask for this, but it's funny, the community behind BSV. um I need to start becoming more open to everybody here in the crypto space, because going back to the start of my mission here with crypto was to actually tap into all of the crypto cults and show them that there's a way out, to like awaken something within them. And there's an opportunity here in BSV. I think I somewhat accomplished it with the Hex community. What do they call themselves? The Hexagons or whatever. That's not been going so well. Again, no offense to that or them. It's just these were all patterns that I was seeing of worship over a individual that's behind an altcoin, and how it relies on that individual and how active they are in the community in order for the relevance to be there and then for the price to act accordingly. So this is not going to get better for BSV. I don't believe it'll ever get better for Hex. I don't think it'll get better for... I think it's even a reason why ETH is become so boring and has not had the moves that we've seen in prior cycles regarding things with Vitalik. So it's no shade thrown at anyone. Waters Above Wolfpack is going to be heading into the year of 2026 strong, doing our best, doing what we usually do. I hope you guys appreciate today's take on XRP and the top 3 expectations I have moving forward over the next month or so. It was great to recap everything with regards to Bitcoin. We have a big week ahead. Please keep safe out there. For any leverage traders, please consider prioritizing risk management this week more than any other week. Please, please, please. And I will be catching you all in the next update. Probably in a couple days, I'll have a written update out. In the meantime, wishing you all an amazing week ahead in the Matrix. Much love.